Back for more?
Resident Evil 6. This has to be the Resident Evil game that strayed the furthest from its roots in the history of the series. And there's a term for this kind of thing, and the term is jumping the shark. This is a term that is used to argue that a creative work or entity has reached a point in which it has exhausted its core intent and is introducing new ideas that are discordant with or an extreme exaggeration of its original purpose. And unlike earlier Resident Evil titles that focused on survival horror and character development, Resident Evil 6 is all about big spectacle and mindless action. It prioritizes flashy explosions over any meaningful gameplay or storytelling. It feels almost insulting to play this game. And I'm a fan of most of the Resident Evil series, but this game, it goes far beyond the identity crisis that started with Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 6 is a showcase of a franchise that has lost its soul and succumbed to chasing trends and cliches set by action shooter titles in the pursuit of greed.
Fall in line, soldier.
Playing this game is like being in a hellish fever dream after you've taken about 10 hits of acid. There are 4 campaigns, 7 characters, all trying to relate to each other in a convoluted web of stories. They try to have these stories intersect and all tie together like it's some sort of fucked up dream where all you want to do is wake up, but you can't. Like if Albert Wesker got really sick and he had like a really bad fever and he was trying to go to sleep, this game is like the kind of nightmares he would be having.
And I want damage reports.
First, let's talk about the development of Resident Evil 6. Producer Masachika Kawata was interviewed by Eurogamer for Resident Evil 6, and this interview gives us a lot of information about the development and how Capcom decided to shit on creativity in an attempt to increase sales figures. This game is truly a monument to the greed of the gaming industry. So in the interview, Kawata says that Capcom believed the survival horror market was too small for Resident Evil, and that the development team would instead choose to orientate the gameplay around the action genre. He goes on to state that the sales of survival horror games can't compete with those of the industry's big hitters such as Call of Duty. I mean, just what a sickening statement to hear about one of your favorite series of games. And yeah, this says just about everything you need to know about the development. Capcom is a company that only wants to make more money. They didn't give a shit about the legacy of Resident Evil. They don't give a shit about the legacy of survival horror. They most certainly did not give a shit about making a good game. They just wanted to compete with Call of Duty. And one of my immediate reactions to this is, then why didn't or doesn't Capcom just make a new IP and it can be as action-focused as they like? Well, the answer is because they wanted to milk a recognizable series for some profit. Kawata goes on to say, looking at the marketing data for survival horror games, the market is small. Compared to the number of units Call of Duty and all those action games sell, a survival horror Resident Evil doesn't seem like it would be able to sell those kind of numbers. So from the start of its development, this game was never going to be anything special in and of itself. Its only purpose was to sell as many copies to as big of a market as possible, and boy did they try and make this game as big as possible. Every stereotypical generic action title you can think of all rolled into one is what this game is. And this whole chasing the trend situation just goes to show the disconnect between the executives at these big budget studios and actual gamers. During this era, if you were a gamer, chances are you either played Call of Duty or knew someone who did. But what was the allure of Call of Duty at this time? Why was it so popular? Well, it was primarily the multiplayer. The executives calling the shots at Capcom failed to grasp the obvious. If they were actual gamers, they would have known that players weren't drawn to Call of Duty for its single campaign. Of course, some people were, but the reason Call of Duty was raking in cash at this time was because of the multiplayer. And many gamers, including myself, we knew all sorts of people who exclusively engaged in the online multiplayer without ever touching the single-player mode. They sought the competitive, team-based gameplay, not narrative-driven stories or campaigns. But Resident Evil 6 still attempts to incorporate multiplayer elements, even though it's not really a multiplayer game. It's like they didn't understand what made multiplayer games like Call of Duty successful. Instead of focusing on team-based dynamics and competitive modes, which is what drew the players to COD, Resident Evil 6 has these multiplayer aspects like forced co-op, and they just work against the game, and they're not what anyone into multiplayer games like Call of Duty want to play. It just feels so out of touch, like they made a game for this big market of action players and Call of Duty players, but it's a game that market, those people don't even want to play a game like this. So they've effectively made a game for nobody. And, you know, when I was saying how people, especially around 2012, they were solely into these multiplayer, competitive, team deathmatch games. Well, this is also the reason that these companies eventually stopped making games as single-player and a multiplayer package, and just led to just multiplayer standalone games. I mean, why waste money making a single-player if people just want the multiplayer? And once the companies discovered microtransactions and loot boxes, well, that was the death of games being released with both a single player and a multiplayer all bundled together. And maybe you've heard people say things like, Call of Duty ruined gaming. Well, this is the reason they say it. It all started with these big companies trying to chase the dragon that was Call of Duty. But to be fair, it's not really Call of Duty's fault. It's the fault of greed. And businessmen that take over these gaming companies, they aren't looking to make a good game. They just want to make a good profit. And I'd like to give a special thanks to my friends Devilry and Poonthrax. These two guys helped me play through this game in the co-op mode. And here's Devilry's immediate thoughts on Resident Evil 6.
There's a few, I guess, IPs that have done this where they start out kind of like grassroots and they're super good quality, and then they kind of blow up in popularity, and then they jump the shark and they become almost a parody of themselves, like this over the top action blockbuster version of what it originally was. Like a good example is Fast and the Furious, the fucking movie series. Started out super grassroots, and then it's now it's a joke. It's larger than life. It's almost making fun of itself. Same thing kind of happened with Resident Evil.
And you know, like he was saying, many of these franchises and gaming companies, they really got popular such a long time ago that these studios, they were just so much smaller back in the day. So when a modern game is released for a series that has been going on for a long time, you have to realize it's no longer the same studio that made the original games. It's not even remotely close. It's not being made in the same kind of environment. There's no creative freedom at these big budget studios. These games are made by hundreds of people, with the marketing and the accounting department making the big decisions. And Resident Evil 6 was made by over 600 people, which is just fucking insane to think about. This game, it's like some executives sat around a table and made a massive list of checkboxes to hit. They tried to put everything any action military shooter game of the time had. They try to shove it all into Resident Evil 6, and it really does have everything. Everything except a soul.
Change course from Route 1 to Route 4.
Those things are enormous! I didn't know BOWs could get that big!
They're giving them new stuff. They can make any kind of freak show they want.
It is the pinnacle of gaming disappointment. If you had never played Resident Evil 6 before, would you know that all these clips I'm showing right now are from Resident Evil? If I told you it was from some other generic military shooter that was like a third-person Call of Duty, would you believe that? Since this game had no focus about what it wanted to be from the start, Capcom decided to just double down on that. Instead of focusing on one game, they would just stuff it all in and split it into 4 different campaigns. In keeping with the co-op precedent that was set by Resident Evil 5, you must play with a co-op partner in 3 out of 4 campaigns. In Ada's campaign, a co-op player is not required, See, if you don't like the co-op, well, there's a campaign for you. And this is the kind of logic behind these 4 different campaigns. They each play very similar, but there are small design changes in each of them. Like Capcom would probably try and argue that they wanted to put something in the game for everyone, but not really. They only wanted to make each story have some cliche or some trend that was popular at the time so that they could market the game to the biggest audience. And going through these 4 stories is like going through the 4 deepest layers of hell. I imagine most people would start with Leon's story since it's the first one to choose from. And from the start, you'll notice the story in Resident Evil 6 has somehow gotten more grander and more spectacular than Resident Evil 5, which we've now entered into Marvel superhero levels of grandeur. The story is so over-convoluted and disjointed that it's really like a big pile of vomit. And almost none of the story is told through actual gameplay. It's all told through cutscenes, and holy fucking shit, there is a lot of cutscenes in this game. There is about 2 hours and 15 minutes total of cutscenes, and they are all spliced together throughout the game, so every 2 minutes of gameplay, you're going to get a cutscene.
Are you okay?
Let's just find the survivors and get the hell out of here.
HQ, can you read me? HQ to Echo, report.
Hey! What the hell are you guys doing over there? We need to evacuate, come on!
We detected traces of the C-virus in the gas.
We're moving in to search for surviving evacuees.
Wait!
We want to help.
All right, come on.
Some may last 30 seconds, some may last minutes, and even when you're not in a cutscene, you're most likely in a fucking quick time event, or at the very least, the camera control is being taken away from the player somehow. And then lastly, you'll be in some sort of action shooter gameplay, which just plays about the same or worse than other military shooters. Compared to Resident Evil 5, the controls in this game are way better. The amount of control you have over the character is actually pretty cool. You're able to do a lot of like action hero moves. You can jump backwards and roll around. You can roll left or right, take cover, slide, crawl. I mean, you can do it all. But you will rarely need to do any of these moves because the actual gameplay doesn't really need you to. If anything, you'll accidentally just roll or slide by mistake, and there's just not really any reason to really do any of the fancy moves in this game. Which reminds me, before you can even play the game at all, you're forced to do a tutorial, which they call the Prelude, which is the single worst tutorial or intro of any game I've ever played. And it's just the absolute worst shit you can imagine. It's incredibly slow and boring. It's full of QuickTime events. It's also just a part of the game that they took from later on in Leon's story, so you'll have almost no idea what the fuck is going on at all. And it's really just like watching one big-ass 10-minute cutscene where you have to do some QuickTime events every now and then, like a really, really shitty adventure game or something. And then, when you're finished, you get to watch some more cutscenes. Like, how exciting. It's like this whole tutorial is just like, it's just screaming, just look at these explosions in action. Oh, look at me, see, we can do it too. And the tutorial itself is so over the top and so bombastic that, as a player, you just start becoming numb to the spectacular action from the start. So the cool explosions and the scripted sequences, they quickly start to become annoying and agitating. You're not even in the real fucking game yet. So anyway, once you're done with the Prelude tutorial, and finally in the game, well, the fever dream only starts to really set in. It won't take you long to see how this game tries to just undo and go against everything that made Resident Evil so beloved in the first place. The zombies, while they look cool when you shoot them, are just so non-threatening they're just pathetic. The AI is near non-existent in these guys too. They mainly serve the function of supplying the player with ammo when they are killed. Need ammo? Just go punch a bunch of zombies to death. It's a pretty lame mechanic. Like, in an action shooter, it makes sense that you kill an enemy, they drop ammo, because they also were using a gun with ammo. But they put this mechanic into Resident Evil 6 for all the enemies, including just the normal zombie. Like, what the fuck? Like, these zombies just carry around 5.56 ammo or 12 gauge shotgun shells? Like, okay. The original zombies from 1996 probably had better AI than the zombies in this game, maybe about the same. They mostly do not react to the player at all, but I think this was intentional as they only serve to be vessels for dropping ammo. Also, since these are C-virus zombies, they cannot transmit infection through bites and scratches, which a zombie infecting others is one of the things that is even cool about zombies in the first place. I mean, what's the point of turning people into zombies if they aren't going to be able to infect others? Like, why not just drop a fucking bomb on them instead? You know how in Resident Evil games, a big part of the game is like figuring things out and exploring and uncovering a mystery? Even if the game gives you hints and stuff, it usually feels like it's you as the player are the one to make the progress. Well, in Resident Evil 6, you will never need to figure out what to do or where to go. Your objective will always be marked by a waypoint. At any time, you can just press the left bumper and it will give you an arrow to follow telling you where to go. At all times, any objective that you need to do or item you need to get will be shown on your screen marked by a HUD indicator. Just like every generic action shooter ever made, and none of the waypoints or indicators are really even needed. There is usually just one straight path to follow or some easy objective to complete. And the game tries to have these pseudo-horror sequences sometimes, like this moment here, where you enter this house and there's some dead people on the couch and the door's locked, so you need to find the key.
Damn it, it's locked.
And the game just tells you where the key is. Like, what? Just immediately marks it on your screen. So why even try to have this horror section in the game in the first place? Walking one room over to where the indicator on the screen says the key is, that's not ever going to be scary. I mean, that's not exciting. There's no tension. This is just shit. And because of this design choice, the game does not and cannot ever be anything like prior Resident Evil games. It's the core philosophy of the design is so different. It's just a completely different game and type of game, just using characters from Resident Evil games. And it kind of feels like they put these small sequences like this in the game to tease the actual Resident Evil fans. Like, fuck you, Capcom, fucking assholes. The fever just keeps getting worse now. Try to wake up only to dive deeper into the nightmare. The focus on over-the-top action enters the realm of comedy at many points in this game. Not in the way like an action movie like Deadpool is funny. No, Resident Evil 6 is funny because it's so bad. The over-the-top spectacle of this game is truly something else. Story-wise, this just turns the game into an over-convoluted mess. For example, in Leon's story, you go from a college campus to a city holdout that is reminiscent of Nazi zombies, to a bus crash over a cliff, to a church, into the catacombs that lead into an underground research lab, to an underground cave area where you find Helena's sister, who then turns into a C-virus boss, to an airplane where half of the airplane level takes place after the pilots have been killed and no one is flying the plane, to you flying the plane, crashing the plane, to a boss fight on top of a train, to crashing the train. To a cutscene where you call Chris Redfield, and Chris is piloting a fucking military jet airplane, and then we get to the dumbest, possibly funniest boss fight I've ever seen in any game. This is the fever dream of a schizophrenic, folks. The villain transforms into a dinosaur, while a military combat helicopter piloted by Ada Wong indoors is flying around and also shooting and attacking this T-Rex dinosaur, while you, the player, shoot the dinosaur with machine guns while riding on the back of a military Humvee, and all this is happening indoors in this little area. Did you get all that? Here, let me tell you again, because it really is a lot to take in. The main bad guy turns into a fucking T-Rex dinosaur, while Ada Wong pilots an attack helicopter, who's also attacking this thing, while you also shoot the dinosaur while riding on the back of a Humvee, and all this takes place indoors in one small area. Jesus Christ, they say that when a series goes on too long, it will eventually become a parody of itself. Well, this is it. This is the pinnacle, this is the peak, tip of the fucking top, all fueled by greed.
I think we picked them off!
Stay focused! We can take it!
Damn you!
The inventory is completely gone. Everything is now just on the D-pad. You still have to combine herbs, but that's about it. There is no more inventory or anything like that. You just press left or right, up, down to equip weapons from a list. The actual gameplay, which is all action and shooting in this game, is pretty bad too. You have these movement mechanics like being able to jump backwards and shoot, and you land on your back. Like, that could be cool, but there's no point to use any of the fancier movement stuff. You will have to use the cover system a lot since most of the enemies have guns, which is just, standard action shooter stuff. This is what the combat is like in this game, you can see here. I wonder if someone not familiar with Resident Evil 6 would have any idea at all these clips are from a Resident Evil game.
Look out! Train!
And one of the many problems of this game is that it has nothing original in it. They just took a bunch of shit from other action games and shoved it into this game. I mean, see, this game plays exactly like a generic military action shooter. But the bad guys you are fighting just happen to be infected. Like it's a generic shooter with a Resident Evil skin.
How's our injured friend?
Still with us? I'm going to administer first aid!
Alpha team, come in. There's an old T-42 tank moving on your position.
Like you just installed the Resident Evil DLC or some shit that makes enemies look kinda like they're infected with a virus. Sometimes the enemies may transform in the middle of battle, like grow a reinforced limb or something, but that is the only difference between this game and every other generic action shooter. From a gameplay perspective, there is almost no difference at all. Besides laying waste to zombies with your tactical military weapons, every character has insanely overpowered melee abilities. A lot of times there's no point to even shooting enemies because you can just kill them quicker with your melee attacks. And the melee attacks just look ridiculous, just like over-the-top action movie stuff.
Out of the question! You need to get to safety!
Don't worry about me. I can handle myself. You need the help.
And everywhere you look in this game, like all the small little details, there's always these little references to military shooters. And I'm going to call these references Call of Dutyisms or CODisms, because that's what they are, really. They're just like these small little things that try to remind you of whatever was the popular trend in 2012. For example, when you go to pick up the rifle ammo, it's not just rifle ammo. It's not named rifle ammo. It's named 5.56 ammo. Okay, that makes sense, but it's not just 5.56 ammo. It's NATO 5.56 ammo. Like they could have called the ammo BSAA 5.56 ammo, and that would have made a lot more sense. Your weapon isn't an assault rifle. It's a Special Forces Tactical Assault Rifle. These CODisms are everywhere, from the way like the characters look, to the way the camera moves in cutscenes, to the way the characters speak to each other during the missions.
Gets left behind. Not on my watch. Understood?
And even like the way the music is throughout the game. It's like the series was bitten by a Call of Duty infected zombie. And it was just a small bite at first, but the infection slowly started to spread until all that was left was Resident Evil 6.
Marco, power this thing up! I'm on it!
This game has a skill system so that you can unlock upgrades and perks. It has all the perks you would expect. Yep, don't you just love creating a loadout and picking perks and stuff? That's all I'm going to say about the skill system. Since the HUD tells you just where to go at all times and highlights objectives on your screen with an indicator, there are no puzzles in this game. Like, you may need to perform a sequence of actions that resemble a puzzle, but there aren't actually any like true puzzles or anything. Any key item or way to open the way forward, it's just all marked on your HUD. The game really does not want you to think at all. Like, in this area of the game, I need to find 3 keys to open a door. These 3 keys just so happen to be spread out in random spots throughout this area of the city. Like, okay, what the fuck? Why would the characters even begin to look for these keys in the first place? But, you know, luckily, the keys are all highlighted on your screen by an indicator, so off you go to collect 3 keys that just so happen to be nearby, and you come across this door that you need to turn off the power, and the power lever is just 2 feet away from you. And the giant red lever is marked by an indicator. Like, what the fuck is this? Here, Ada needs to get through this door, and the game just straight up takes the camera control away from you and points it at the lever that is right next to you. What the fuck? I mean, they actually do not want you to think about a single thing in this game. It really is insulting. Like, they're saying, yeah, don't think about anything, just shoot gun, just punch zombie, just look at these big explosions, you fucking moron.
You gotta be kidding me. Don't talk, just run. Keep moving.
And when you're not in a cutscene or a QuickTime event, the game is always taking camera control away from the player for brief moments to try and make you look at something. Which that something is almost certainly going to be highlighted by a fucking waypoint anyway, and the camera is very zoomed in already, and even though the game is a third-person action shooter, most of the game takes place in these very tight corridors and hallways. And you're always turning around corners and stuff, so there are times where there's so much movement and so much stuff changing, then you lose control of the camera so it can quickly point somewhere, and then you're in a fucking cutscene and you're back now, but in this small area, but the player move speed is so fast it can actually start to make you feel like you're getting motion sickness. Like, you know, in shitty action movies too, when there's like a fight scene and the editing is like all over the place, like there's a cut every half second, it's like, what the fuck is going on? That's what it feels like to play a lot of this game. Like, what the fuck just happened, really? I don't even know where I was at the start in reference to where I need to go, right? I'm just following the fucking waypoints. I'm in some crypt and the game just leads you back to this objective. Like, you don't even need to think about your surroundings or where you are. It's like a roller coaster. But the fucking safety thing on your chest snapped off and you're hanging upside down like, please God, let me off. The music in this game is alright, I guess, but it's just standard generic action music. One thing I can't stand about shitty action games is like once the music starts playing, it will never end. It just loops forever. It really takes away any impact music will have on like the whole game since you're always being bombarded with music the entire game.
Alpha is still on premises. Bombing will start once they're clear.
I mean, there are times where they keep the action music playing throughout like entire cutscenes.
I already gave the pilot the coordinates.
Thank you so much for your help.
Hey. We met?
Well, you jarheads all look the same to me, pal. Sorry.
You've got to be kidding me. My mistake. I'm safe.
Jesus fucking Christ, make it stop. Also, if you really want to see just how poor the actual gameplay is in this game, turn the music track off. Once the action music soundtrack is gone, you'll notice just how devoid of life this game is. While turning off the music in any game will make it less lively, of course, it's just really, really apparent in this one. The action music really does carry a lot of the sequences. The boss fights usually look cool. They are all very scripted, and there's usually some sort of like spectacle or cliche going on. And a lot of times it's hard to tell like when or even if you are damaging the boss. Like maybe, I mean, a lot of times it's like you're supposed to just wait for some scripted moment to happen to where you can actually damage them.
I didn't know they came in extra large. How many new species are there?
On our tails. I need the APC's firepower now!
Removing the barricade now, sir. I'll be there as soon as I can.
And these bosses are massive bullet sponges, and you will most likely need to melee some zombie trash mobs to get ammo. And almost every boss fight you have these zombies endlessly spawning for you to kill to get ammo, because they know the players will run out of ammo. So the non-stop action is truly non-stop to the point of nauseam. And then near the end of the boss fight, there's going to be some sort of scripted sequence where they try to add in some stupid drama to go along with the story. I don't know, it's really bad. And the truth is, there's not really a moment at any time in this game that isn't just so bad, it's funny. It doesn't matter which story or which character or which chapter, the game is so stuffed full of these spectacular moments all fused with these military cliches. It really is fucking funny.
Waiting for!
I'm on it!
And if you have to play this game for whatever reason, then play it in order to laugh. Because that's the only way you'll be able to have fun. If you try and play this like a serious game and get immersed, well, you're gonna want to pull your fucking eyes out. So anyway, let's take a short look at the main characters. Leon's character is just like a shallow version of Leon. Nothing really happens with him throughout the story. He's probably the most true to his character out of the bunch, but they didn't really do anything with him. His partner, Helena, is probably one of, if not the most forgettable character in the entire series. She has a boring design, her character itself is boring, and she just offers nothing of interest. She kind of hints that she is like into Leon sometimes. I mean, what lady isn't into Leon, yeah?
See you down the road, Leon.
Ada!
What are you waiting for?
Go after her.
No. We're sticking together.
Ha! Don't make that fucking face, as if you would have any chance with Leon. Get the fuck out of here, Elena. Chris now has completely turned into generic military action guy. He's like a captain in the BSAA, but he can also fly military jet airplanes. Yeah, fucking right. His partner is some dude named Piers who looks like Justin Bieber. He's like super duper serious army guy, but since he looks like Justin Bieber, I just can't take anything he says seriously. And then we have Jake and Sherry's campaign, and you know, I'm not sure if anybody actually really gives a shit about Sherry Birkin's character. Like, yeah, she was the little girl that Claire had to rescue in Resident Evil 2. Like, they just included her just for that reason alone, to remind you about Raccoon City, so you can be reminded about a time before this game came out.
Sherry Birkin, you were in Raccoon City.
I can't believe this is happening again. It's just like Raccoon.
The Raccoon City incident. You were one of the survivors.
Yeah, I'll never forget it.
Leon's not just anyone. He saved my life back in Raccoon City.
And then think about how far it has fallen as you play through this shithole. Her partner is some dude named Jake, who is also Albert Wesker's son.
Damn it!
Chris, listen to me.
I need you to rescue 2 hostages from an underwater oil field. Agent Sherry Birkin and Jake Mueller.
It's Albert Wesker's son.
Like, what the fuck? Why? Maybe they made him Wesker's son to try and tie the stories together or something and have some drama between him and Chris, but holy fuck, it's so stupid. His character is supposed to be cool and edgy, I guess. He's like a mercenary with superhuman powers.
Isn't it?
Dying for money is one thing, that's my choice. But dying for no good reason, that doesn't sit right with me. So...
And he also has the antibodies for the C virus because the plot needs him to, which is why Sherry wants to protect him, but they don't like figure this out. Well, half the characters don't figure this out till later on, and I don't know, it's just so over convoluted and ridiculous. Ada Wong has the most interesting story in my opinion, which isn't saying much because the bar isn't very high to begin with, but basically the main bad guy Simmons was in love with her, and when she left him, he tried to recreate her in a lab. So he creates a fake Ada, and this fake Ada, who doesn't know she is the fake Ada, then betrays Simmons because the plot needed her to, and now you have to try and stop the fake Ada from destroying the world. And the last bit of Ada's story is the only interesting part once you confront the fake Ada, and she believes she is the real Ada. Even after turning into some sort of C virus slop, she still screams about how she's the real Ada.
That. You know what will be left of this world?
Nothing! Hell will rise, and chaos will reign! And I, Ada Wong, will be queen of the new world!
Hate to break it to you, but you're nothing but a cheap knockoff. At best.
Which was really the only interesting part I thought in the whole game. Which, you know, there was some confusing elements to Ada's story, like... So this girl gets turned into a fake Ada Wong, and she doesn't know she's a fake Ada Wong. But the original part of her like somehow remembers that the Simmons guy did this to her, so she's really mad about it even though she agreed to it in the first place. So therefore everybody's gonna have to die. But she still thinks she's the real Ada. Only a clone of so Ada, why would she want to destroy the world? They thought like her mind and everything else was supposed to be just like Ada, so the entire world. And somehow she has the money and funds to do this? Where did she acquire all this money?
Yes, it was quite revealing.
How do you mean?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it you on this tape, Ada? You're the one behind Neo Umbrella.
And it may sound confusing, but somehow Ada's story is actually the most coherent one in the game. Oh, I forgot to mention, Ada Wong has now completely transformed into Spider-Man. Her grapple shot is now basically a superpower, allowing her to just web swing anywhere at any time. Well, not actually in the gameplay. When playing as Ada, you need to just go to where the HUD indicator tells you to go to shoot your grapple shot, but in cutscenes and shit, she's basically Spider-Man.
I'm tired of playing cat and mouse.
So what we get is a military action adventure story, with no focus, told between 7 characters, with hours of cutscenes and mediocre, uninspired gameplay. And all the stories try to tie together, and there are points where they all intersect with each other, but it doesn't really work out too well, and it just feels incredibly forced. And some of these boss fights are really, really fucking shitty, and you get into a new story, and then, like, that story intersects with another character's story, and you have to do the exact same fucking boss fight over again. It's like, god damn it. And then all the obvious trend chasing and action cliches with the over-convoluted story, it's just really fucking crazy. It's like if you had a bunch of greedy executives that don't play video games, they all sit down at a table and they try their best to design a game, then they hire 600 developers to actually build that game. This is what you get. The game is a perfect example of everything to not do if you are making a video game. If you're a game developer, do not chase modern trends and cliches in an effort to reap maximum profits. This goes for other art forms too. We see this shit happen all the time with Hollywood. A good movie comes out and hits it big, then there's like a wave of these similar movies that all suck, just trying to profit off the one good movie. So with Resident Evil 6, Capcom spat on the legacy of survival horror. They abandoned everything that made the series great in favor of mindless action and cheap thrills, betraying the loyal fans who supported the franchise for over a decade. And Resident Evil 7 was very close to being another game just like Resident Evil 6. Originally, they wanted Resident Evil 7 to be a live service game full of microtransactions and loot boxes. But I'll save that one for the next video. So, stay tuned for my next Resident Evil video, which is going to discuss gaming's biggest comeback with the return to survival horror, with the fantastic and horrifying Resident Evil 7. This has been David with Consternation Evolved. Thanks for watching.
Stay calm. After what she's done to us, how many of our men are dead because of that bitch?
I'm right there with you, Captain. But your personal vendetta isn't gonna get us anywhere. If you hadn't been blinded by vengeance, we could have prevented some of those deaths.
Shut up.
Do you even care about our mission anymore?
Shut up!
I feel sorry for all the men that died believing in you. What happened to the legendary Chris Redfield, huh? What happened to you? It's a good thing Finn's not around to see you this way.